Welcome to episode 12 of Screenaholics. I'm Mark Dittmer, and my guest in this episode is Yon Goldblatt. Yon is a friend I met in we met in church, and a church that neither of us belonged to, and we were both in a way kind of passing by, coming as visitors, and that's fitting because in a way we're both on a quest, and I think that's something that you get from Yon when listening to him talk. That he's very much he's a spiritual seeker, and that's what it's all about for him. And I admire that about him, and I think it comes through in our talk. We talked about, and it was shorter than either of us wanted to talk. Jan especially has told me already since the things that he's thought about since that he would like to talk about more. He's well read. He loves music, and he's well traveled, and he's been through a lot, and so he's moving from here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's moving to North Carolina. As I record this on Tuesday, February. I record this intro on Tuesday, February 13th, and I believe he's leaving town tomorrow, the 14th, and moving to North Carolina. So he'll be bringing those stories of his to the East Coast, and hopefully sharing some wisdom over there. But in any case, pleasure to talk to him. We've got the Man to Men weekend coming up in 4 weeks from now as I record this. The Sterling Men's weekend coming up in 2 weeks. So Jan is a graduate of the Man to Men weekend, and we talk very briefly about that in this episode. But I just want to mention it for anybody out there who is interested in doing a men's weekend. There's some opportunities. The links are posted in on the Screenaholics webpage, and you need to get yourself or get the men in your life to a men's weekend. Reach out, contact me, and let's celebrate. Let's unify the men in our lives and unify humanity. Okay, well, I've stammered and stuttered and for 3 minutes now, and let's get Jan here on the microphone and hear from him. This is Yon Goldblatt, episode 12, Screenaholics. There we go. So yeah, man. Tell me about when you first came to the Bay Area, or what's this? Because it's sort of a bookend. You're about to leave.
I've been here multiple times.
Uh-huh.
So I was actually born here, but lived in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
First time I came here was probably in the 80s. My mother lived in San Francisco on 3rd and Irving Street by UC Med Center. Used to spend a lot of time in Golden Gate Park, and I love that place, especially the Arboretum. But been here a few other times. Lived in Alameda a couple different times. I'm a massage therapist now, and used to have a practice there on Grand Street. And after the pandemic, I lost my practice, and currently homeless. But that's pretty much the extent of the Bay Area.
Wait, so you lived here in the city? You were in the city as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and then you left. You leave before you were grown up, and then came back as an adult.
Probably about 2 years old.
Oh, so you were here for a minute.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Enough to be born.
Oh, okay.
In the 60s, 62.
Uh-huh.
I was born. My dad was a merchant seaman. He worked for Marine Cooks and Stewards. He was a chef on cruise ships. So he was gone a lot. My mother was a transplanted beatnik from New York into San Francisco when everything was moving out here, the scene. So my mom was pretty much living the scene more than being a mom, per se. And so it probably worked out best for both of us that I was adopted by my aunt and uncle in Colorado. And lived there since I was 2.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you came back out here as an adult then? was the next time you came back
Yeah,
out?
I was in probably my 20s in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So what was the Bay Area like back then? Like what's the
Way cool, man. I loved California back then. I'm not too crazy about it now. It's
Yeah.
kind of gentrified and expensive and um, not very, what would be the right word? Um, Communitive. It's lost a lot of its kind of community.
Yeah.
It's people are very separated now. Some of that has to do with technology. You know, it's changed a lot of the dynamics of socialization. But yeah,
What
between those two elements, it's changed quite a bit.
what years? Tell me more about like so it was the 80s kind of and
Mm-hmm.
was it the East Bay that you mostly lived in?
No, San Francisco at that time.
Okay, in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you doing back then?
I was just working odd jobs, doing a lot of drugs.
Uh-huh.
My mom, of course, was, more like a friend than a mom. So, she was accommodating as far as the drug scene. And my mother's place in San Francisco, it was like on any given moment of time, a party can erupt. Someone would come by, and all of a sudden there'd be a party. She knew a lot of people,
Yeah.
and of all different types. And so it was cool, especially I was a teenager around that time when I first met her. I hadn't met her until I was about.
Oh, because you've been out with your aunt and uncle, so you really hadn't seen her
I
during that
never
time.
had even. Well, yeah, initially they told me she was dead.
No shit.
Yeah, and but something in me knew that it wasn't true.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I had an uncle who we used to go out and have a haircut every Thursday and have lunch. And he said to me one day that he was going to find out the truth about my mother. And I pretty much had forgotten about our discussion. And one day I was going to a special education school, and I seen my Aunt Melba come in, and she goes, "Your uncle's out in the car and wants to talk to you." And I never saw him cry. He was a real strong man.
This is different than the uncle that adopted you. Different
Yes,
uncle. Yeah.
yes. This was my father's brother.
Huh.
So I always knew him as my uncle. I guess he still would have been. And I always knew my real father as my uncle.
Oh yeah.
And my uncle is my dad. So because I didn't know I was adopted till I was probably about 13, 14, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And
Damn.
yeah, so I thought my aunt and uncle were my real parents, but they weren't. And my real father would just show up when he wasn't on the ship and come visit me, but I thought he was my uncle. So, an extremely violent man.
Yeah.
Small man, ice blue eyes, white hair, tattoo of a Spanish galleon on his chest, hoop earring. Real pirate-looking guy.
How'd you get to? I mean, give an example of how'd you learn he was a violent man?
Well, just from stories, and
Yeah.
Also me and him just never meshed real well.
Yeah.
He didn't have much patience for me,
Yeah.
and I was a kid that required quite a bit of patience. I was hyperactive and prone to outbursts myself. My aunt was a rageaholic, so I learned how to deal with everything through rage.
Uh huh.
Uh-huh.
Uh huh.
And I was beaten quite a bit as a child. So that's how it took me most of my life just to heal emotionally. I still am prone to be able to go there, but I don't very much anymore.
Yeah.
Just don't have the energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So learn to deal with life a little differently.
What were your parents' names?
My real parents?
The ones you're talking about.
The one that beat me?
Yeah, and the mom and yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was my adopted parents. She was my blood aunt. Her name was Alma, and my father, whose name I carry now, was Arthur Goldblatt.
But that was the one you were. But that's not the man you were talking about who was in the Merchant Marines.
No, that's Alfred Mantelli.
That's Alfred Mantelli. Okay.
Yeah. So I was born Italian.
So I've heard you mention that name. Yeah.
Yeah, but I grew up thinking my name was Goldblatt, and I've always kept that name because I really my father was a real compassionate, gentle, loving man, and I'm proud to have his name. So
Yeah.
never changed that. But, definitely a man who you'd want to role model yourself after. Very giving, loving, compassionate man.
And your mom who you sort of joined up with and became friends with
in San Francisco.
Yeah. What was her name?
Well, her name at that time was Norma.
Okay.
And then she changed it to Cheryl.
Okay.
Massey was her last name.
Huh.
She grew up in the South Carolina, backwoods. Mother was a pill popper, always in bed.
Her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jeez,
Her
wow.
mother. Yeah. And so my mom ran away at 15 years old. Went to New York City. Got into the beatnik scene, and then went to California, San Francisco, where she met my real father. She was sick in a motel. My dad knew the guy that ran the motel and told him about her in one of the rooms, and so he brought her some soup, and that's how they met.
Okay.
Fell in love with her feet.
Oh yeah.
Which is abstract because I have a foot fetish. See.
Okay.
So some weird way that's genetically transmitted. It's really strange.
I never heard that. No.
Yeah, that's a trip.
I know the head coach of the Jets had a foot fetish and got those.
Really?
Sort of made headlines somehow.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, that's. I always found that very strange. That somehow that was transposed genetically.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So.
So you hung with her a little bit here, and then you stayed here for how long? Like,
I ended up running away, taking off back to Denver. My mom got involved with some guy that I brought home off of Haight Street, musician, and he was kind of a dick, and I just split the scene. Then I ended up getting locked up because I busted into my adopted parents' house and stole a lot of money.
Ah, shit.
And got locked up as a juvenile for 2 years.
Oh, I thought you were already in your 20s now, so you're still in.
No, yeah, I kind of.
Still your teens.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense with running away. Yeah.
Yeah, I was evidently I missed that part of that. After that, I was in my 20s when I went back.
You went back again.
To see my mom.
Okay.
But that would have been in the 80s.
Okay.
But it's really close to that time because it's at the time it's 17. I was 7. It's 1979, so it's almost the 80s. And then I took off, did my 2 years.
Okay.
And locked up, and then I was with a girlfriend for 5 years, and during that time, me and my girlfriend had come back out to meet my mom. So that's the part I had conveyed to you earlier, being the 80s. But 79, I was 17, and that was the first time I came out to stay with my mom.
So your perception of the city is kind of around beatniks. Like there's a lot of beatniks in your. Well, in your circle that you were running in, because that's your mom's.
Well, there were hippies at that time.
Yeah, your mom's.
The beatnik scene was back in New York, really, and that changed. You're talking like Kerouac times, like the 50s. It was the beatnik scene, late 40s and into the 50s, and then that all moved to California. Even on the road with Kerouac, it was between New York and San Francisco, and Denver. Those were like the three kind of places, and that was kind of how it was. Interesting part of that is you will find that liberal cities historically were where there was a mint. You had the Denver Mint and the San Francisco Mint. I've never been to Philadelphia, but that's where the other mint is. Of course, they don't have the San Francisco Mint anymore. But I always found that interesting. Of course, that goes all back to kind of Masonic Lodge type stuff. Of the Masons of those places must have been a lot more liberal than other Masons that developed cities across the country.
The places that had the mints.
Yeah. Sure. Your first Masonic Lodge was in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin, in that time. But and Benjamin Franklin himself was very much a liberal, comparatively, you know.
So having been kind of around the country, I guess, I'm trying to go for these vague, sweeping generalizations because I almost can't imagine getting into all the, like you say, like I'm gonna have to have you back many times to get. I can't get your whole story here.
Yeah, I've got. Yeah.
But so, what is your what's your perception of like where the country's at, like with all these various regions? Like, how would you compare them? Where do
Boy,
yeah.
I don't even know if that's so much as. I've always looked at it. You know, I haven't done a lot of study on the Masons, but there seems to be kind of lines drawn between historically with the Masons, and this also kind of ties into a book called The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills.
Okay.
And in the book, he talks about it doesn't matter what town or city you're in, there are certain families that run everything, the newspaper, the banks, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of the controlling entities of certain areas. And he talks about like the military establishment and political establishment, and then one of the new kind of establishments that came about was the Hollywood crowd. That was like new money compared to old money.
Yeah.
And they never were accepted into the old money clique. No matter how much money they had, they still could not buy their way into that blue blood kind of trip, you know, of the old money. And so I kind of still think that differentiation is still around, even though a lot of that's gotten muddy. The water's gotten muddied through a lot of different people from other places coming to America, kind of changing those dynamics. But that still underlying element is still there of those lines. So I basically look at Texas as a very separate entity, Hollywood, and the Texas Masons. Texas is very much, they're the Lone Star State, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And if anybody would want to secede from the Union, it'd definitely be Texas.
Yeah.
They're definitely their own entity. Cake, the group Cake, talks a lot about that kind of. He's very cryptic, but I really click on a lot of the stuff the guy raps about, you know. But a lot of it's kind of that country and Western ilk.
All right, what
square dancing crowd, you know.
what are your top 5 favorite music?
Well, Marley and Dylan.
Okay,
of course,
they're the tied for first, Marley and Dylan. Okay.
Yeah, they're both rapping about the same things, but they're just coming. Dylan's more of a socialistic rapper, and Marley's kind of more of a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dylan, of course, evolved more spiritually later in his works, like Infidels, when he kind of embraced kind of the Christian entity more than he had. He got religion, I guess you could say. So his lyrics definitely changed and weren't so much just on a social dynamic as they were in his earlier works. But even in his earlier works, he would allude to it, like Gates of Eden or things like this. But they both were communicating something. They were conduits of something from a higher plane that were being expressed through them, Marley and Dylan. So those would be the two top, and then
they were both around when you were a kid. You would enjoy that.
But I wasn't into them as a kid.
Okay,
I was very tunnel vision as a kid with music.
And they were still new, I would probably imagine. I mean,
Yeah,
it wasn't like everybody was.
like, it had to be rock and roll.
Okay,
And
okay.
not that way anymore, but,
Yeah.
I was very prejudiced as a kid with music.
Okay.
As a lot of people are.
As a
They're
lot of
stuck in
people
a
are.
genre,
Mhm.
And they say they love music, but they mean only the music they love is the music they love. They don't mean they love music in general. Because anytime you play anything outside their genre, it's like nails on a chalkboard to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite so like that anymore. I can appreciate things that aren't in one genre. So, but I guess those would be my two top, and then I like cake a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Mm, gosh, there's so much good music out there.
Like pick something from each genre or something like that.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I'll just name a few.
Yeah.
Let's see. I like, of course, the Who's probably my favorite rock band.
Okay.
If you just talk about rock, I love the Who. I like Zeppelin. I like the Stones.
Mm-hmm.
Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company. That's great stuff.
I don't know Big Brother and the Holding
I
Company.
love Paul Simon.
Yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
Paul Simon. Paul Simon's great. Always has a great drummer.
Yeah.
Like today, I was listening to Danger Mouse. I just listen to things, a lot of stuff across the board.
Yeah.
I love the Roots.
Okay.
The Roots are great. Questlove and all them cats
Uh-huh.
are really good. Anything that's real, that's not just fluff.
So did you? Was there a? I imagine you're not able to see that much live music today.
Yeah, I haven't for a long time.
But did you? Was that used to be a big part of your life going to see
First
concerts?
concert I ever saw was about 9 years old,
Uh-huh.
in Hawaii on the beach.
Wow.
The Kingston Trio played on a flatbed truck on the beach. Yeah. Got drunk on screwdrivers. My sister was a bartender and was going to University of Hawaii to take art. She lived on that base and was a bartender on the base, and so she was going to be getting married. And I went out there when I was about 9 to be in her wedding, ring bearer, and so I got to see the Kingston Trio. That was probably my first concert. One of my favorite songs as a kid was "Classical Gas." I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's just classical acoustic guitar. There's no lyrics. It's all instrumental. But that song used to just hype me up like you can't believe. Played organ as a child for a couple years and was in a recital. I won the recital. I was about 9 at that time. Played piano for a few years.
Organ. Yeah.
Organ and piano.
Yeah.
I made the terrible mistake of me and my adoptive mother were at the bank, and there was an organ in the bank, and so I was fiddle-faddling around because I'm bored.
Yeah.
So she goes, "Oh, would you like to play the organ?" I go, "Sure." Just thinking it was an off-the-cuff question. And next thing I know, the doorbell rings, and they're bringing in a friggin' organ. And I had to take lessons and shit. I hated it because I was so hyper. I'd literally slide from side to side on the bench while I was playing, because I just couldn't sit still. I was such a hyper kid, so it was just torture for me to sit there for an hour. So I'd just sit there and just play this random shit like I wouldn't even be practicing, just so my mother heard the organ playing. Just to sweat through the friggin' hour. And my mind could be free. But yeah.
How about favorite favorite books? Because
oh yeah,
I kind of go in there sometimes I think I spend too much time worrying about I should listen to more music.
Walden, of course.
But yeah, go ahead.
Thoreau,
Uh-huh.
He's my man.
Oh yeah.
I feel like he's incarnate. He died in 1862. I was born in 1962.
Okay.
And it's just he expresses everything that I feel. And for the man to be able to see so clearly at that time where we were going to end up, which was not very far, it's just incredible to me how clearly he could see through the illusion of what America espoused it was, and
I don't know much. I mean, I haven't read him yet. I think I have his book here, but I haven't picked it up. So
and I'll tell you, they don't want anybody to read.
They don't want people to read that. No shit. Okay.
It's that detrimental to their ways. It's the only book that they expose to children in the public school systems, usually in around the 5th grade, which is so far above their comprehension at that time, so that they feel they've already treaded that land, or they never want to look at it again. And I feel they do that on purpose, to keep people from reading that book.
Huh. Yeah.
Because it's only over a couple hundred pages, but to think how much he crammed into that is mind-boggling. But I just recently found out not too long ago that he edited it for 7 years.
Okay.
So every word that's in that book was weighed on a scale, literally.
Yeah.
He did not waste any word out of that whole book. Every word has a purpose. And the ones that, of course, he really wants people to look at, he italicizes. But what's interesting is he says America has dwindled into becoming an odd fellow, and he capitalizes it as a proper name, like the Oddfellows. And so I always found that very interesting.
Would you? So, how about if you were to rate the decades of American history, recent American history, like 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s? Like how would you just Would there be some ups and downs, or would it be an all prevailing trend in one direction?
You mean like just the decades of what?
Yeah. So the culture.
Like when did the day the music died?
Yeah, exactly. Was that the day the music died?
Right. Yeah. That, of course, is a heavy song too.
Yeah.
It's very cryptic.
Yeah, I was into that. I was really into that in college.
It's a really good song.
Yeah.
It really is. And what's interesting about people like Don McLean, it's like there's people that just have something that really got to say, and you never hear from them again.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of how he was. He had something he needed to convey, and he did it, and that was the end of it. But I don't know, decade-wise, I don't know. I mean, everyone feels that, the good old days or whatever, and that kind of nostalgic retrospect,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of that percentage I have in my perceptions.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone ever really does know.
Right.
But
well said.
In my opinion, I definitely think that not that we ever knew our way, but we continually lose our way even more as time goes by.
Yeah.
And the distractions of technology have just furthered that kind of separation of reality.
Yeah.
Like now we have virtual reality.
Yeah.
I love this commercial. The guy goes, "When I was a kid, we didn't have virtual reality. We just had plain old reality." That's kind of how I feel about it. That it's missing the forest for the trees. It's being duped. It's being manipulated. And now with AI and all this stuff, it's like you're so subject to being manipulated now because you are so focused on the technical entity that are you able to step outside of that and think for yourself, or are you just being manipulated? So I feel that people need to to think about that, because I could be wrong, but what if I'm right? So it might be something for people to reflect upon and think, is the society that's being given to us really what we want? Is the fruits that it bear going to be good?
I mean, the big one that I've seen in my lifetime is with the phones that we all. I mean, I'm using one to record this podcast, but there's but there's all, I always have it with me, and everybody
Right.
now has it with them.
And there's nothing wrong in and of itself, but is the tail wagging the dog or is the dog wagging his tail?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if we really are clear on that in ourselves.
But I
As
guess
to, is it a tool or is the tool using you or are you using the tool? You know, so because it's making it to where we won't even have a choice to live a normal life without through those tools. You know.
mm-hmm.
And so there won't be an alternative, you know. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I really don't.
Yeah, like I mean, I guess there's always been like probably that it's not like the iPhones are new, but technology is a like growing technology isn't new, right? Like that's been like because it was the TV when I was a kid, right? Like
Yeah. Well, Gandhi had a way of kind of measuring this, you know.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't against technology. He was against technology that replaced people, not
Mm-hmm.
technology that assisted people.
Okay.
So like a sewing machine was cool to him,
Yep.
okay?
Yep.
Because it helped the person that sewed. But once it doesn't need the person anymore, he's not into that kind of technology. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a way of differentiating what's maybe positive.
Yeah.
Because with AI, now we're getting to that point where they don't need the person anymore.
Yeah.
Because they can build machines that do everything, you know. And so it makes man obsolete,
Yeah.
you know. And that's scary because in a world where we're overpopulating and they need less of you,
Yep.
what are they going to do with all them people?
Yep.
They're just going to pay you to sit at home and enjoy yourself? I doubt it.
UBI.
I doubt it. Not
Yeah.
capitalists. You know, maybe socialists might, but a capitalist isn't going to pay you to do nothing. You know, so we might want to think about where the world's headed. And strangely enough, I think we're on that precipice right now of there's going to be a massive showdown, like a third world war, is where we seem to be heading. And I pretty much everyone's taken their sides. You know, you've got the BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
Oh yeah.
They've established their own economy, their own banking system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because everyone's dividing the lines now. Okay, and so you've got a lot of problems with China. Korea's acting up, Russia's acting up, and not about it's about 5 years ago, Russia and China had joint military exercises. That was the largest display of military power in the world through history. So why did they do that? Just for fun? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like things aren't going to get better for them the longer they wait because of the power of technology. Plus, at the same time, America really is in a state of decay as far as being dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Because with technology, that's allowed a lot of other countries to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
In where America's not the only one with that ability, you know, and a lot of that also has to do with schools and the students that attend those schools and how hungry and disciplined are they to learn. Well, they're probably a lot more hungry and disciplined to learn in countries that have been downtrodden than countries that have been spoiled. You see.
Yep.
You look at a lot of history with Genghis Khan or all them cats. You know, it's like the good life will kill you, make you soft.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great song by Marley where he goes, "Them soft, yes, them soft."
Mm.
You know, and it's like there's a few songs that he makes addressing about not doing drugs because then drugs are going to make you slow. You know, that's not the music of the ghetto. You know, and that's a lot why America puts drugs into ghettos is to keep them down, to keep them under control. You know.
What do you what are the so what are the I was going to ask about Hunter S. Thompson on the topic of drugs. But
I love him. He's great.
Yeah.
Well, he's enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times funny stories are tragic.
Right.
You know, Vonnegut's really good at writing like that. Makes you laugh at things you probably shouldn't be laughing at. You know, yeah, Hunter S. Thompson is quite a character, man. He's a man that lived his life his way. You know, and sometimes that produces horrible consequences. But at least he was free and he did his thing. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, Louis C.K. had his line about drugs was he said you can't tell kids to stay off. I mean, you can't just say don't use drugs because he says drugs are so good that they'll ruin your life. That's his
Sure.
joke on them. But it's like there's some truth to that. I don't know.
And I think that's why a lot of it, you know, believe me, if the government wanted to stop anything, they're very capable of doing it.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know, I mean, they really are.
Yeah.
So, you know, if there's advantages to that being allowed, they're going to allow that to be. They play both ends against the middle. They provide the very evils they condemn. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are the three major things our government legitimizes, and they're probably the three things that kill the most people.
But
so when they say drugs are bad for you, they're not talking about the ones they sell. You know, they're talking about the ones that are competing against the ones they sell. You know.
But I mean, like, you know, but of course they legalized alcohol. No, they illegalized alcohol before we were born.
Right.
But
even though they kept drinking the whole time.
That's right. They never really.
Well, you know,
you've got to meet.
Our judicial system. A lot of that is to surplus, deal with surplus labor. You know, they house you in a jail, and they can do that by making laws or enforcing them. You know, it's a way of when they have too many people and not enough jobs, what are going to do with those people? We were just talking about that earlier. See, you know, and one of the ways they've done that historically is through our judicial system and through plea bargaining. Plea bargaining allows them to shuffle large amounts of people through the judicial system without giving them a trial. So usually, what happens when you get arrested is they'll put like 5 charges on you, and then when you go to court, they'll say, well, look, the DA is willing to drop this and this and this if you plead guilty to this. And then you don't get a trial, you say, I'm guilty, they shuffle you through. If only 10% of the people took their case to trial, it would destroy the judicial system in this country. That's how powerful a jury trial is, because it would just plug up the system. So that's why plea bargaining is so big, and that's why they nail you with so many charges when they arrest you. See?
Oh.
So that you'll plea bargain.
Oh.
And not take it to trial.
Oh, I didn't know. I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah. There's a book I read. Can't recall the title at the moment. He was a professor in Michigan somewhere, but it has to do with it being used to to house surplus labor.
Okay, well, from a lifestyle perspective, you're giving your friend advice. Top 5 drugs to recommend. I guess I don't know if you want to top 5 worst drugs or best drugs.
Well, I could
either way.
I can go there.
Either way.
The worst drug's heroin.
Okay.
Because a person is no longer independent once they do heroin. Now, I've never been on it, but I've seen a lot of people that have, and once they are, they're a slave to it. They'd sell their mother for it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's that controlling. You know, it becomes their god, and they cannot. Very few of them can break free from it. You know, I've known people that have hung themselves from trees in the park, and horrible stories. You know, of people that have died on the streets from heroin. It's just the worst. You know, you literally can control a human being. Like, you ever see French Connection, where they catch him, Popeye Doyle, and they get him hooked on heroin, and he'd do anything. Like, you know, you just dehumanized him.
Yeah.
You know, even though he was so against it, once he was on it, he was just as much a slave as anybody else.
Yeah.
And so that's the worst. The next one I would probably say is alcohol.
Yeah.
Alcohol, first of all, it diminishes your judgment. So to me, it's so idiotic to say to a person, yeah, you can drink, but you can only drink this much. Well, the person you're talking to sober is not the person you're talking to who's had a couple drinks. His judgments have been impaired.
Mm-hmm.
So how's he supposed to make a good judgment when he's got a couple drinks in him? Okay, I'll take another one.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon he's past the point of no return, and then they want to hold him accountable for poor judgment. See, and so I have a real big thing against alcohol because they supply alcohol and then they don't drink.
Yeah.
You can buy it.
Yeah.
Just don't drink.
Use good judgment. Yeah.
Just give us your money, but don't drink it. Same with cigarettes. Everybody hates people that smoke. And it's like, fuck, man. Then why do they sell them? It's like they supply the very evils they condemn, and it just pisses me off.
Sure.
It's a great line in one of Dylan's songs. Sometimes Satan comes as a man of peace. Nobody can see through him, not even the chief of police. And then he makes a reference to both hands are greased. It's like he's playing both ends. He's selling them, and then he's locking you up when you drive drunk.
Yeah.
It's like playing both ends. And so I have a lot of problems with that in our society. How they're on both sides of the fucking situation. They supply it and then they lock you up when you're drunk. That pisses me off.
Yeah.
So that would be my second one. The next one would be methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Methamphetamine is what my friend Alex, who was my mentor on the streets, he said that's what destroyed the 60s movement.
Yeah.
Was speed.
No shit.
He goes, even the government themselves would infiltrate communes and bring drugs into the communes. The communes weren't about drugs. They were just about living outside of the system, independent, see. What destroyed them was drugs. So they would infiltrate them with drugs and give drugs. And eventually speed is what he said destroyed the 60s movement of going back to the land, living simple and free, kind of agrarian type of system,
It seems like a real common war technique these days. It's like infiltrate and destroy from within. I mean, everything.
They do that on
every
the internet now.
fucking exactly. Like every movement. It seems like it's
there's
everywhere.
a great podcast by the New York Times called Down the Rabbit Hole.
Yeah.
And it's about a guy who was a gamer, and his gaming computer breaks down, so he starts watching YouTube. The next thing he knows, he gets sucked into this world. He was watching 4,000 hours a year of fucking YouTube. And it was manipulating his perceptions of who's politically correct in this country and not.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would like, oh, these guys know what's going on. And then like 6 months down the road, there'd all of a sudden be this new sect. And he'd go, all of a sudden they make the other sect look like they're idiots. And he's like, they don't know what's going on. These guys know what's going on. And he runs this whole gambit, and finally he realizes, I'm fucking being manipulated here. It's like a 4-part series on New York Times podcast, down the rabbit hole. I didn't know anything about it until I listened to that. They'd say, oh, the Russians are getting into our elections. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is bullshit. No, that's what I was trying to say earlier about, are you sure you're thinking for you, or are you being manipulated into thinking thus? See?
Yeah.
And this is where people need to be extremely careful, because they're using that against us to divide people, to divide this country. Trump, all that shit. They're pitting us against each other. That's got to stop.
Yeah.
That's fucking got to stop. That's the wrong direction this country needs to go.
Yeah, I was at a 12-step meeting this morning, and somebody mentioned politics, and I thought to myself, like, well, yeah, I know. Man, I think things got really worse in 2020, but then things got really worse in 2016, and it's like, I don't know where I noticed the polarization. Maybe 2000 is when it really started.
And it doesn't even really matter when it started. It matters if and when it's going to get better or end.
Yeah.
I was taught when I was locked up as a juvenile, I was in an intensive program, and my one-to-one counselor, he would address my anger or whatever, and I'd say, I just don't know why I get mad. And he goes, it doesn't really matter why. He goes, you're like a person whose tire goes flat, and you're on the side of the road going, gee, I don't know why that tire went flat. He goes, it doesn't really matter. You need to change the tire, get on down the freaking road. See?
Amen, yeah.
Well, that's kind of like what we don't need to get lost in the whys of shit. We need to like figure out what we need to do to like get on down the road.
Here, here.
You know. So try not to get bogged down in whys.
Okay, so, but we were talking about the polarization, but that was brought on. You talking about methamphetamine being used to infiltrate some things.
Yeah, it's very destructive because it's very addictive.
Yep.
And it's addictive because, in my own beliefs and experience, it ties into your sexual desire.
Yeah.
So it's working with desire.
Yeah.
And once that's really what you become addicted to, is your desires.
Yeah.
More so than the drug.
Yeah.
It's an amplification of desire.
Okay.
You know? So that one's a dangerous one because it's combined with your desires. You know, it's like you want to throw away what you desire. You know, it's like that's pretty hard to do. You know, so that's a toughie. It's a very interesting drug. I guess after that, I don't know. I don't really think ecstasy like MMDA or acid is negative,
right?
Or mushrooms,
right?
Or pot,
right?
I mean, they alter you, but I don't think in a negative, destructive way.
No issue like change in the pot. Like, have you noticed the pot changing over the years? Because I mean, that's what I keep hearing, but I haven't used it in a long time.
Yeah,
but it's still essentially pot. It's not like it's.
Well, what's even more crazy is it's like nothing exceeds excess like excess. It's, even when that's not strong enough. Now, I know a guy. He probably spends $400 a week. He gets pot, and then he's got the dab shit that goes on top of that. He makes like a salad, like a sundae, of all these distillates and this. It's like he's taking it to such extremes where it's like, if he used to smoke pot, he probably wouldn't even get high because there's all this other shit that concentrates, that are so strong. That's where really, like, shit, the pot's nothing compared to the concentrates is what really wrecks people, because now you can't even like get high unless you go to these crazy ass extremes, because your body, and that's pretty much with any drug, the more you do it, the more you need to get high.
Yeah.
That goes across the board. That's like starting out on beer and then needing whiskey. That's kind of goes with just about any drug. You need more of it the longer you use it.
Going back to the methamphetamines, are crystal and speed very different, or what you said sort of applies to both?
Well, what they're doing now is they're putting this fentanyl shit and everything.
Yeah. So
it's not even just straight speed anymore.
Yeah.
You do the speed and you fall asleep.
Yeah.
They got fucking heroin and shit, or this synthetic heroin shit mixed in there,
Yeah.
So now they've got you. I don't even know how much that really contributes to the addictive element, but I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
But to know that as a user, it's a very tough line to draw of where the fentanyl, the elements of the fentanyl are affecting you, where the speed's affecting you.
The fentanyl is almost in the heroin family in the way that it
is. From what I understand, it's a synthetic heroin.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know a lot about it. I just know that it's cheap and abundant, so they use it as like a filler.
Yeah.
And also an additional addictive element to what they add it to.
Yeah.
To hook you. But I don't know a lot about it. Other than it makes you sleepy as hell.
That's a relief not to know a lot about it, I suppose, right? You're not,
Possibly.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly. Exactly. Yeah. You don't know.
I mean, there's probably parts of it that it's best you don't know, but there's other. If you're trying to figure out how to get clear of it, and maybe there is elements you might want to know. I don't know.
Well, I didn't hear
be able to detect it in the drug.
You feel like cocaine's pretty.
That's another one that works off desire.
Okay, so
it's just not as amplified.
It's
as
like
meth.
speed. Okay, yeah.
It just increases your desires.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't really think of any other drugs, at least that are used extensively in our society
Mm-hmm.
than the ones we've addressed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, alcohol and heroin are probably what I think are the two most destructive socially.
Yeah.
You know, and then meth.
Yeah.
You get rid of those three, there's really not a lot to worry about in people wanting to escape reality for a while. You know, I get that.
Well, I call this the Screenaholics podcast. So the bit is I mean not the bit but it's sort of based on this idea that we're all addicted to screens. I mean I wonder and I suppose that would be interlaced with desire too because there's so much porn on the
Right.
on the screens.
For sure. That's I guarantee you that's the number one thing watched, at least in America.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And that a lot of that has to do with just the way our societies ran. You know, they've turned womanhood instead of womanhood being a mother,
Mm-hmm.
womanhood's become being a whore.
Mm.
So women try to look like a whore to attract men. They become nothing more than a sexual object socially. A man is what he does, and a woman is what she looks like. You know. And you go to a bar, you see a woman, you're like, oh, she's hot, man. And you walk up to her and you introduce yourself. She goes, oh, what do you do? That's
Right,
what
right.
she asks you.
Right.
Because a man's what he does, and a woman's what she looks like. See, and I know that's a real
Generalization.
It's a topic that wants to set a lot of people off because
Mm-hmm.
they're going to interpret it through their own way
Mm-hmm.
of what I might mean.
Right.
But I'm not trying to make any judgments here.
Right.
I'm just trying to go, hey. You know, I don't know how much of a percentage of what you do in your life is that, but socially, if we look at it as a whole, that's kind of the trade. You know, there's $40 billion or whatever a year in cosmetics. You know, and women are very obsessed with how they look, and that's because a woman really doesn't know how to be a woman other than to be an object in our society, and they've just been relegated into that role, just like a man is what he does for a living. You know, it's like outside of that, she doesn't have any value, nor does a man. Once I'm a homeless guy and no job, you don't see women beating down anybody's door. If Tom Selleck was a gas station pumping gas at the gas station, he probably wouldn't be. You know, everybody would be, oh, look at Tom Selleck. You know? So you know, I mean, a lot of that, you know, it's true whether we want to, you know, accept it or not, because it might condemns certain people into having to look at things that are uncomfortable about why they do what they do, you know. But there's a lot of truth to it, you
know. Do you think that some of that has to do with like secularization of our society, and how much of
money,
that would you?
It all revolves around money.
Uh-huh.
A guy doesn't buy a Porsche because he wants a Porsche. He's trying to attract women.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, and women look at a man as security, or being able to get them the things they want, to have a family or have security, where they're not worried about shit. So money is the driving factor there because it empowers everything. You know, money is what it takes. It's the fuel. You know, if you want to get somewhere, it's going to take money. You know.
What is it they said? Was it Jesus's quote about you can't man and mammon, or you can't serve God and mammon?
Yeah, because you'll grow to love one and hate the other. Yeah.
So you think that's kind of what's happened to our society as in general? We've.
It's hard to serve two masters, especially if they're diabolically opposed to each other. You know, I mean, there's a great book, and it's funny because he never really kind of defines, you know, the secret perception of it all. It's called Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber. And he addresses this.
I gotta tell you, my dad is this big social scientist, and that's like his hero is Max Weber. Yeah.
Wow, I'd like to talk to your dad.
Yeah.
I gotta get him on here.
Yeah, we can three-way it for sure.
Yeah, it's you know, but yeah, it's like, how can you reconcile these two completely different philosophies?
Protestantism and
capitalism.
Yeah.
How is that possible? They're so different from each other. But now we go into what's called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, where you can actually do the exact opposite of what you espouse and not see that you're doing counter to what you espouse. It's like a cult, or when people truly believe something, it doesn't have to make sense to them if they truly believe it. See, like Mormonism, there's one for you. Doesn't make a bit of sense, But to them, it makes perfect sense, because they truly believe in that thing, even though they live counter to what Jesus ascribes. They do
in the sense of like what, having a prosperity,
serving God and serving man as Jesus would. They don't do any type of helping the poor, anything like that. They just go to church on Sunday dressed up, and that's it. There's really not much more to their what the church is about. At least the Catholics do something for people, or whatever, or the Baptists. They have missions and they feed people. And what the Mormon Church does is they give $36 million to some organization that feeds people, and they're like, "Oh, our work's done." It's like we made 900 billion, and we gave 36 million. We love Jesus, that kind of stuff. It's but to them, you could spend the rest of your life trying to have them see the hypocrisy of their situation, and they would never see it.
But they must have had something that you saw, because I know you've checked, you found yourself.
That's right.
In that church, looking around.
I'm not speaking of stuff I haven't seen. These young men who I still admire a great deal. The missionaries. You
can pull it around however you want. Yeah.
I really do admire those young men.
Yeah.
But they're being used. Now that's nothing against them.
Mm-hmm.
It's against the church, and God will judge them accordingly. But as far as in their minds, they are doing what they think is right, and I sure as heck can't hold them accountable for someone that's manipulating someone who's not naive. But that's what brought me into the church, is I knew it was a God thing, and so I went ahead and pursued it. And
you could tell you were talking to some people who truly believed.
I knew that those young men came into my life for a reason.
Yeah.
And so anytime that happens in my life, when something keeps coming into my presence, I know there's a reason why, I did that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I studied with them for a year.
No shit.
Mm-hmm. And because I was really downtrodden at one time, and the three people that came up to me to talk to me were Jehovah's Witnesses. And I go, this has to be a sign. So I only knew of one Jehovah's Witness at the time. He was an older guy, a contractor, and I said, "Hey man, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to see what you guys are all about, And so they'd come to the house once a week, and we'd study the Bible, and sometimes we'd reach impasses of where I didn't agree with what they thought, and I said, we'll just have to agree to disagree and just move on, because I'm not going to change the way my experiences are. Like, they don't believe God intervenes in man's life, and I'm just like, that's not, can't be so,
Yeah, he must, yeah.
There's certain things like that we would have to disagree on. But I learned a lot about the Bible through them, because they're very much literalists of the Bible, man.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, man. If the Bible says this, then they go like the blood transfusions, and not celebrating holidays unless they were celebrated in the Bible, and just all kinds of things. They're very sticklers. You really want to learn the Bible, and you may not necessarily agree with it all, but they will definitely teach you the Bible word for word, man. They're very sticklers about what the Bible states. So,
you mentioned the Catholics give money to charity, or
they're horrible, but at least they do something.
Okay.
Oh yeah, they've stole more than they give.
Do you find
same with the Mormon Church? A lot of them.
But do you find that are there sects or religions out there that you feel like are maybe they've got a good thing going, or do you feel like we're all pretty much lost right now?
Well, we all know in part, therefore we prophecy in part, right? Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to have a hole.
Okay.
And I think probably the people that live most healthy and right, but by same token, there's certain things I don't agree with them. Is the Amish?
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they try to live a simple life, a godly life, and not get lost in chasing the elusive butterfly of whatever, you know. And they just stick with tradition, and I think for the most part, it's a very healthy way to live. But I think they have extreme. In other ways, they have extreme. Like I would love to live with the Amish, but there's certain things I would not want them controlling me on. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a mixed bag there. But yeah, if they could just take some of the strict and dogmatic crap out of there, I think the rest of what they got going on is pretty cool, man. A good way to live, you know.
What do you think of like some of the so I've pretty much haven't been able to find a home in any church or yet anyway. I'm still I'm not ruling it out, but I like these 12-step meetings a lot, and the men's weekend is another kind of, but it's not a church, but it's a thing. You've experienced both of those. You've done some 12-step stuff, done some men's weekend stuff. How did those things work for you?
Well, it's like just about everything else.
Yeah.
What they espouse is great.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not they can live up to that their own standards is another story. You know, so I don't necessarily like to throw the baby out with the bathwater because in some ways, things are good.
Yeah.
But everything's a mixed bag, and
so
you don't want to like totally let go of yourself and totally adopt something, but you can take what is good and protect yourself from the rest, I guess, is my opinion on that.
Yeah.
To me, as far as what a church should be, is an organization of a community that helps its community.
Yeah.
That's really what a church is. It has nothing to do with finding God. Really, I believe it's kind of God that awakens someone. There's a lot of people that in their life they are arduously looking for God, but they don't find him. And then there's other people that aren't looking for God but find him. See? So I really believe it's something more that it has to do with God's will for you. And I think what makes a person more the probability of him finding God more has to do with how much of his ego he diminishes, surrenders. And when I feel a person is broken and realizes he's not all that in a bag of chips, I think that's when God comes to you, is when you're open. But if that ego's in the way, he's just going to let you knock your head against the side of the pool a couple more times where you open your eyes when you're swimming, you see.
Yeah, somebody's stuck being self-reliant because they can't be God-reliant, so then if you're self-reliant, you're going to bang that head.
Yeah. You have to open your eyes. You just can't go through life blind, thinking, I don't need anything or whatever. I don't need to look where I'm going or whatever. But you do. You need to look at things that you may not want to look at. I don't know how. I can't really tell you. I know how I found God, but I can't necessarily tell you how everyone else does.
Yeah. Well, did you tell me how you found God? Is this a...
Yeah,
I mean, we got...
I went to a kegger party, and I dropped some acid, liquid LSD, and on our way after we leave the party, I'd gotten kind of squeezed out of a house where I lived by my buddy's girlfriend, and I seen her car in front of the house, and I said something derogatory about her, and my friends kind of egged me on, and they're like, you ain't gonna do shit about it. So I go over there and I like get on top of her car, smashing her car all up, threw something through the windshield, and of course they wake up going, what the hell's going on outside? And I ran and I kicked down their front door.
Oh, Jesus.
And so about that time I figure I better get the hell out of there because the cops, they didn't have a phone.
Okay.
So I went and hid in a bush, and I heard them run past to go call the cops. So I just stayed in that bush, and I'm tripping,
Yeah.
and there's bugs crawling all over me, and in this bush, and I'm sweating, and I just broke down. I broke down. I didn't know about God. I just wanted to be in my mother's arms. Was
Yeah.
the way I visualized it. I
Yeah.
wanted to be secure and held, And that's when I think God came to me.
Yeah.
It's like everything changed. I met my yogi. I came out here to California to stay with my mom. She's living in Alameda at the time. And she goes, I don't know what to do for you. I don't even know where to begin. She goes, but I saw a guy on public access TV, and he did Vedic astrology. And there was something about the guy's hands that made me write down his name, And she goes, I guess we could start by getting your Vedic astrology chart done. And long story short, that's how I ended up. My yogi was a friend of the astrologers who saw my chart, and he said, I need to help this guy. And so I met him, and he gave me a mantra, and I did a fire ceremony, and I became a vegan and chanted, and I did that for about a year, and things just changed for me. Once I started meditating, chanting, it was pretty much like my yogi said. What it does is it just cleanses your mind of all the garbage, and it stills it, and it allows you to be still in your mind unless you were wanting to bring thought in. So it kind of just everything changed at that point, but it all happened after that night in the bush, and I knew I needed to get off alcohol, and I was off alcohol for probably 20 years. I'll drink periodically now, but I'm not as.
It's not as dangerous for you.
It never was something I desired. It was something that when I did it, I would lose control of myself.
Right.
So I never was a person that loved alcohol. I probably loved pot more than alcohol.
You're just aware of the judgment issue around it, yeah, or like the
cliff,
yeah.
And like I said, I've slowed down a lot. I don't have the energy, to just go off at everything that goes wrong in my life. I just don't have that kind of energy to try to control everything, and be retributive towards people if I don't like what they did or any of that stuff. I just don't have. It's easier for me to accept things now than it is to try to fight everything. It's like a friend of mine said: choose your battles wisely. You don't need to fight everything that comes down the pike. So I try to really keep that in mind. Is what is going on in my life, is that preventing me from doing what I need to do? Do I really need to make this a battle? Because if it's not stopping me from what I need to do, then it's insignificant to me. You see, it's all back to ego again. A lot of that stuff's ego driven.
Yeah.
How dare you do that? Like that kind of stuff. That's all ego shit. You're fighting stuff because you're insecure. So. Yeah, anytime anyone wants to get into me now, I just agree with everything they say about me, and it takes away all their power, and they don't know what to do then, because they've thrown all these slings and arrows at me, and I go, you're right. So why are you even talking to me if I'm so fucked up? It's like, I just make them feel like a fool, because they're expecting me to fight back, and I don't. Just takes all their power away, and when you take someone's power away, they don't like doing what they're doing because they have no power. So they stop, either that or they try to escalate it, and then if it gets to that, like I said, I can go there too, but I just have to be pushed a lot harder than I used to be to go, get crazy or wild and go off, So
Well, so are you excited for this trip here? I mean, when are you going, and what's the?
Yeah. Of course, I'm excited.
Yeah,
to me, it's I lost a lot of purpose in my life once my lady killed herself. That's another story for another day, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I had no purpose in life. I've been trying to find out what to do with my life, and this has kind of opened up an opportunity to maybe. Salvage what I have left of the years that I have on this planet. Of course, I have my own personal goals of wanted to build a bushcraft house in Washington State somewhere. I'm going to spend my summers doing that.
Yeah.
To leave to my stepdaughter.
Uh-huh.
Like something to just leave behind. I don't even know if she'll accept it, but I'm going to do it anyhow.
Uh-huh.
But
and what's the and you're so in Asheville you're gonna pursue.
For those of you that don't know, I met someone who me and Mark know, and he has offered to purchase some land and allow me to live on it and develop it, and in trade for a place to live, to stay. And so he doesn't have the time to look for himself for the land, and so he's kind of got me out there looking for the land and doing the footwork. And so I'm going to be heading out that way to prospect some land and have something to do.
Wow, what a trip! Do you lived there before? So do you know anybody? You got any contacts there?
No, I don't.
So you'll know.
I mean, I could possibly run into someone I knew there,
yeah.
but I don't know. I haven't stayed in contact with anybody I knew there.
Yeah, yeah.
But you never know. Life's a strange thing. I've ran into people that in different places that I never thought I would have ran into them. That I knew in a different place, and I'm like, I mean, what are the odds of that? You know someone in Boise, Idaho, and you just happen to be in Denver one day on the mall, and there's the guy you knew in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
I mean, those are just really strange how you bump into somebody at any point in given time that you haven't seen, or you knew them in another place, and then all of a sudden they're where you're at. Strange. But so that's kind of what's going on with me now. Is hopefully a new chapter in my life, and a positive one. And,
yeah.
So.
Well, and I guess now we're gonna go shoot some pool with the aforementioned fella.
Right, my send-off
Yeah,
party.
you got any? And he's any tips for anybody out there who plays pool? What's the
Practice. Like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get. Because I used to be really good at pool, but that's all I did all night.
Oh yeah.
When I was young, I'd just go shoot pool all night long. So I got good, And, yeah.
Well, hey, Yon, thanks for doing this. Thanks for sitting down for an interview. It was fun.
Yeah.
And have a great trip, man.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Huh?
All right, brother.
All right.